Yes, everybody, we are back again for another edition of the UNC Basketball Show. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones and AJ. I'm going to do a quick little rundown of what we're going to be going through today. We're going to be talking a little Carolina basketball, obviously, in particular, Carolina's 4-game winning streak, maybe some things we've noticed that have changed throughout that, the vibe of the team through this 4-game win streak, and more. We're also going to talk about the GM hire and Hubert Davis's contract extension as well. And AJ, if you would have been on TarHeelIllustrated.com, you can sign up for just $8.33 a month. Heck, I think we've even talked about it in podcasts before. Those two things in particular are things that we have mentioned months ago that we expected to happen that have finally come to fruition. So again, that's another reason to be signed up at TarHeelIllustrated.com, and other things you can do real quick, some quick housekeeping items that kind of feed into that. For those who listen to a lot of our pods, you'll know what I'm about to say here, but we're on the race to hit a few milestones on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We're on the race for 20K subscribers on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button below. We just got over 18,800, and we are well on our way to 18,900. So I think we can hit that 19,000 mark over the next week or two. So that's a goal. Hit subscribe right now.
19 this weekend.
Yeah, I know, man.
Especially 20 by the ACC tournament, hopefully.
Yeah. Twitter on the race for 40,000. That one's growing a little bit slower. That's the one we're going to try to plug a little bit more. Not seeing as much of an uptick over there, but it's been a slow rise over there, though, right, AJ?
Yeah, the other two have been much faster.
Yeah.
So if you haven't followed us on Twitter, follow us at Heel Illustrated. It's not at Heels, at Heel Illustrated. Follow us and if you have 50,000 different platforms yourself or whatever, you can follow us on all of them. We would appreciate that.
Absolutely. And then
we want to grow that number because we want to give these away. We can't give them away unless we reach our goals.
Yeah.
So and the 12,000 on Facebook as well. So and then we're cruising on that. We're gonna blow. Quite frankly, because we're doing reels now, Jacob. If the Tar Heels get to the NCAA tournament, I think we can get to like 14,000. That thing's growing like crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been great to see on Facebook. And again, links in the description are below to Twitter and Facebook. And obviously, all you have to do is hit subscribe and notification bell too below. So go ahead and do that right now before we dive into this one. Big thank you to everybody that has subscribed. Big thank you to everybody that is a subscriber on TarHeelIllustrated.com. We have an awesome community over there. Again, you can just sign up for $8.33 a month. Links in the description below.
First ever pitch for our Instagram now too.
Yeah. Check us out on Instagram. We started doing some stuff there.
We've ignored Instagram. That's been my deal. That's my call because I can only do so much. And we've tinkered with it a little bit here and there. And I've decided, you know what? I've got all these things that we're doing. We're finally doing reels. We're finally making a big emphasis on Facebook to try to draw people into our tent. And we're doing reels for Facebook. We're popping up those same things as shorts now on YouTube. And we're moving them over to Instagram as well. Plus I'm putting photos up there. So I'm just doing it for fun and organically, sort of experiment. But if you're on Instagram a lot, all that stuff's there now. Everything that we put on Facebook, the YouTube shorts, all the video, all the photos I do pregame and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff's on Instagram now too. It'd be very interesting to see if we can grow that. We have no goals for that right now. We're just letting it happen. And I'm getting used to actually putting stuff on Instagram now, which is just more on the plate, but it's kind of fun now. You know, Jacob, how hesitant I was to dip my foot into this water because I do so much. It's just so
it's
much
always been a manpower thing. I work.
I'm sitting in the Tucker Center at 1:30 in the morning the other night, and I'm getting reels up and making them go to shorts and stuff. But I actually am invigorated by it because the response has been so outstanding. And people want stuff like that. Sometimes I have to pull myself out of the seat, so to speak, and rediscover what people want because their desires and needs and preferences are constantly changing. So we're trying to feed into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's fun because I want to reach more people. I want them, but the reels are great because I'm courtside. I'm right there I won't be there at Castle Coliseum because they don't let the media on the court before the games, which defies logic. But I get a lot of stuff because I want to try to bring people there. I do it in a manner where I want you to kind of like envision yourself standing right there in the baseline when the bigs are doing the dunking drill and stuff. So it's kind of fun. It's fun to see the people appreciate it. I want people to feel like they can get closer to the teams that we cover through the stuff that we do. And it's been really eye-opening in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and just to add on that real quick, I know people don't want to hear us talk about this for so long, but just things that we're talking about here, doing reels, doing Instagram. We've talked a lot about this. It's always been a manpower thing for us. And I think this is the thing that people might not understand is, I'm someone who has a full-time job. You're someone who does this for a living and wears so many different hats as a publisher of this site. Bryant's the same way. Chelsea's a student. I mean, we have a great, awesome team, but there's limited things that we can do. And I think the reason that we push YouTube subscribing so hard, the reason we push liking Facebook, liking Twitter is because the more exposure we get, AJ, hopefully the more revenue we can bring in. The reason we're mentioning sponsorships all the time, looking for those, the more money as a business you have to operate, the more things you can do, which is, I think we've proven that we've done over the years. Is the content is not shriveled up the more we've grown. If anything, it's grown our channel. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think a lot of people might not understand that.
I mean, this is my career. I'm full-time. I work in season. I work 90 hours a week. Yeah,
it's just not but so much you can do.
It's funny. Off season is like off season. I'm pulling back. I work 50 hours a week, 40 hours a week. Plus, I'm writing a book about my high school, which I'm still doing, by the way. Any of my Fort Hunt friends, and they sometimes they don't understand how busy I am during the year. Yeah, and I swear, I think people are like, man, I don't know if he's still doing that. Now it's taking a while to do. They got to understand that 9 months out of the year, I'm knee deep, man. I'm more than knee deep. I'm up to here.
Yeah, you mean 11 and 3/4 months out of the year, right?
Yeah. Well, I have not had a day off since June 25th, 2023.
Yeah, now you'll have one so you'll have a few this off season.
I got some scheduled in late April. I'll talk about that some other day, but I've got some. My 20th wedding anniversary is in April. Nice. April 23rd. So congratulations to me because she's obviously got rock for brains to stick around this long.
Yeah, you're out kicking your covers, that's for sure, man. I think we all. I mean, I am too. Don't get it twisted, but
that's a Friedlander line.
Yeah, I love that line.
I don't kick my coverage.
I love that line, man. I think I've seen him put it on Twitter.
And that's one of those cases where a guy says it and he's 100% spot on.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I think
love
we're
Brett.
spot on with it too. Yeah, shout out Brett, man, a great guy. But yeah, just want to do those housekeeping items. We'll dive into the meat of this podcast, and if you've made it through these first few minutes, we appreciate you listening to our spiel. But AJ, let's dive into the topics on this one, and we're going to start with Carolina's 4-game win streak. I think we have to talk about it. We can't sit here and not talk about it. And for me, I've been on Twitter a lot, and I've been talking with people on Twitter because one of the big sentiments is being, well, Carolina ain't beat anybody. And again, we talked about it in 3 things. We've talked about it a lot, and it's still, I think that belief in the fan base is maybe shrinking a little bit, but there's still a lot of the fan base that's like, it's good that they're winning, but they ain't beat anybody. 3 bad ACC teams, and Florida State's okay, but not great. And I understand that argument, but the thing that I've thrown back at them which is what we always try to present a lot of the times in what we write and in these shows we do, is it's not about the fact that Carolina's winning, it's how they're doing it. And I think that applies more so than ever, really, with Carolina's win streak that they're going through right now. And I want to focus in particular on the 4 position, because there is a direct correlation between better play at the 4 position over the last 4 games and Carolina playing better basketball than it arguably has all season, potentially, when you look at just the course of the whole thing. And for me, it starts with Jalen Withers shining at the 4 spot. He has been absolutely fantastic. Just to run through some stats that he's put up through this 4-game win streak. He's playing 23.5 minutes per game, averaging 13.5 points, 6.5 boards. But these are the ones that really stand out to me, AJ. He's shooting 65% from the floor, 62% from three-point land. Has scored in double figures in 3 of those 4, and had his Carolina career high against Syracuse, which was kind of the game that started this trend for him where he's really been shining. We'll tie Cade Tyson into this in a second. But AJ, this is the question I want to bring to you. To me, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but this is something, A, we've talked about, and I know I've mentioned a lot this year, and B, we're kind of seeing direct evidence of right now. It feels like Carolina this season was always just a competent stretch 4 away. I'm not saying Withers needs to average 13 points and 6 rebounds the whole season like he's done over this 4-game win streak, but just him and throwing Cade Tyson in there, contributing to the team in a positive way consistently throughout the whole season, I think completely changes the conversation around this team and where they're at right now. A, is that too much of an oversimplification? And B, if not, do you kind of buy into that narrative a little bit? Because to me, AJ, it feels like we're seeing direct evidence of that right now.
We're seeing direct evidence of it right now against 4 teams that are not very good. 3 of them are terrible. Florida State's okay. And at home,
on the road,
should be a little bit better than okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they should be. There's no doubt about that. However, and I'm going to sidebar for a quick second here. Every pod we do we've done lately, people are saying, well, look who they've played. And they don't listen to what we actually say, because our conversation, our narrative has been, hey, it's not who they're beating. It's the approach that they're taking to win these games, because they've clearly shifted. Hubert Davis, after the Clemson game, or really maybe even somewhat before, but certainly after the Clemson game, kind of drew a line and said, okay, we're not going over to that side anymore. Like, that is the line that we cannot cross. It's like that part of Carolina basketball season no longer exists. They're not going there. And I'll give you a case in point. This is why having an actual 4 on the floor is something that Hubert's completely married to now. Monday night in Tallahassee, Jay Wash and Lubin each pick up their 4th fouls 37 seconds apart. Hubert's got a decision to make. Who comes in the game? Cade Tyson. Mm-hmm. He brings in a 4, 6'8". Might I throw Burley in there? A hint of Burley?
I mean, that's fair.
That offensive rebound in the first half, that was a Burley play. A confident Cade Tyson is a more physical player. It's a more active player. Suddenly he's more of a 4. So Hubert brings him in instead of moving Drake to the floor and going smallish. It's Tyson out there, and he played well. Gave him what they need. He had 4 rebounds, should have had 5, because he had a tip out that led to a fast break that in which Carolina scored, and he still hasn't gotten credit for that 5th rebound. I asked him about it afterward, and he was laughing, but he gave the right answer. He said, the only stat I care about, 96-85, locked in. So Hubert, that moment in time was the test for Hubert. He ain't going back to smallish, period. So that justifies what you're saying.
Yeah.
So they tried it. They tried it smallish. They tried it super small. Not happening. This team needs to be big as it can get. And if you put a Jay Witt out there, a guy he's their best 3-point shooter on the team. He was their leading 3-point shooter before the Syracuse game, because there was conversation in the press room at Syracuse, which, by the way, the media room at Syracuse for basketball is the visiting football team's locker room, just FYI.
That's funny.
Yeah. It's amazing how it doesn't smell like a locker room, but you know you're in a locker room still.
Yeah.
Okay, back on topic. There was a conversation in that press room before the game at Syracuse about, it's incredible, Jalen Withers is this team's leading 3-point shooter. That was before the breakout. Mm-hmm. And he broke out that afternoon. So he is their best 3-point shooter. He hits his first 3. I think he's hit his first 3 in 4 straight games. He did the kiss the other night. He's like this is the most confident he's been in his college basketball career. 6'9". He's a live wire out there. He's physical. He's active. He plays with some screw you. When you've got Withers and Trimble on the floor, you got some screw you going on that this team completely had nothing of earlier. So you're right. It makes them better. What it also does is when Withers is on the court playing the 4 and Lubin's at the 5, and we told everybody all off season, everybody kept saying, he's Harrison Ingram too. No, he's not. He's a 5 in a 4-man's body, but he got a 7'4" wingspan. So he can do stuff in there. If he gets a guy on his hip, he can get the shot off because of that wingspan. So he's a 5. If you have a 5 and you have Witt as a true 4, it allows everyone else to play their natural position. Mm-hmm. Look at Drake Powell's activity in the last few games because he's playing the 3. He's a long rebound dynamo. Mm-hmm. He's getting long rebounds now. He's getting shots in the lane. He's able to get to the basket from this angle instead of trying to do it from the baseline with a much bigger guy on him. It makes everybody else better because it makes everybody else natural. Nobody's really playing out of position anymore. Previously, you had upward of 2 guys in the starting lineup playing out of position.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense. So now it does. So people that are bitching about Hubert, how come it took so long to do this? Boy, if he only would have done this sooner. Well, maybe it wouldn't have worked sooner because Hubert didn't believe it sooner yet. He had to see it. Sometimes coaches are convinced something's going to work, and it takes until they see over and over and over again it's not working before they change. You see it in all sports. You see it in football. How often do you see a baseball manager keep a guy as a two-hitter for 3.5 months, and he's just not a two-hitter, and then suddenly moves him to the back of the order, he's batting 8, somebody else moves in the 2-hole, and the team starts hitting better. You see it all the time because these guys are convinced this is going to work. Football coaches do it with their plan during the week. You want to know why football coaches sometimes take forever to deviate from their game plan for a specific opponent? Because they're convinced that they already know the best way to attack it because they figured that out during the week. And it takes too long in the game sometimes to make those adjustments. Hubert was convinced that was the way this team needed to play. Convinced. And realization finally caught up with him, and he now knows that's not. Putting Cade Tyson in that situation was Hubert saying, I'm not going back. Mm-hmm. This is who we are moving forward.
Yeah, it makes – you just talked about Drake Powell there for a little bit, playing out of position. Okay, let's think about this. Let's use our brains real quick, right? We're talking about Drake Powell, who's a 3, playing the 4. Drake Powell is what? He's a true freshman, adjusting to college basketball at the highest level. This is North Carolina, guys. St. LaSalle. No disrespect, LaSalle. It's not. This is the highest level of college basketball with a program whose expectations from the fan base every year is to compete and potentially win a national title. That is the expectation here. So a true freshman playing out of position, it's not rocket science that is not the best case and the best place for a guy like him to be. So when he moves back to his natural position and a guy like Jalen Withers steps in and he's playing well, that feeds into the whole team. These are very simple things that we've talked about a lot this year about how these guys playing out of position, it's not working. The reason it's not working is because they are more comfortable playing in their natural position. And when you're talking about this high level of basketball, any sport, these little fine margins that people might not think about, where if you move Drake Powell to the 4, maybe you're getting 10, 15% less production at him because he's not as comfortable there and he's not as versed there. That makes a big impact over time because you're not getting the best out of the players at your disposal. So it feels like we've talked about this all year, and now we're seeing evidence of it working because guys like Jalen Withers have stepped up, because Cade Tyson playing better. And I'll read some stats out about Cade Tyson in a second. But I wanted to just illustrate that fact again, because none of this should be a surprise in my opinion. But now that we're seeing evidence of it working, it just shows that it's just better when you can have guys playing in their natural positions. But in order for you to be able to do that too, AJ, you've got to have those guys producing. And we're seeing that out of North Carolina, which has allowed for Withers to play more and Tyson to come in and play more like he did against Florida State. You can't just put a guy in at the 4 because, well, he's a 4 and he goes out there and doesn't do anything for you. There has to be a little bit of, there has to be a correlation there. But I just wanted to, again, illustrate that because we're talking, you mentioned Drake Powell, a true freshman playing out of position. Yeah, no surprise. He's probably better at the 3, right? I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah. Well, almost 5 months ago, I think it was October 7th, we had basketball media day over in Chapel Hill, and I was talking with Drake. It was my first time talking with him, and I asked him if he could play a 4 in college. And his response was, well, his high school's different from college, and I'm sure I could play a little bit of 4. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, I'm sure I can. Yeah, if I need to.
Honestly, when I went back later, I thought, because we reevaluate, I thought maybe that was a stupid question. I should have asked Drake that. He's not going to play any 4 this year. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, Alabama rolls into town, and Drake Powell's a starting 4 for a long time. Yeah. So he's played out of position most of the season. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen from him lately is he's a rip and run kind of guy. He's a rebound and run kind of guy. Because he plays with his head up, he sees the floor well. He's a long rebounder. The rebounding has gotten better for a lot of reasons. One of them is that he is very good rebounding from the 3 spot. He's not very good rebounding from the 4 spot for obvious reasons. He doesn't defend that well in the 4 spot because he's got to bang physically. If you look at him, I mean, he needs deep pizza. He's going to put on weight in the offseason. He's not a very thick guy. Fours bang. You're leaning sometimes when you're a four. You have to be able to deal with physicality. You have to constantly box out because your guy sometimes or often is another team's best rebounder. And then you got strong physical guys guarding you. It wears you down. And I think in Drake's case that it was a task just to get through some games because of the challenge of him playing the four. Now, Cade Tyson, I think, is probably maybe early in the year we thought he was more natural three because Cade said, well, I'm kind of a three, but I can play four, and I have played four. I think right now, when you look at the composition of this team, he looks more like a four.
Yeah.
Because he may not have enough bounce to be a three, but I think he's got enough to be a four, especially when he's playing confidently, because when you're confident, you're not thinking. If you're thinking step by step, your body's going to move slower. The other night, what we saw from him, and one of the things I love about going to Florida State is we're right next to the court just about, is you could see an absolute departure from what we've seen all year in his body language and how much confidence he played with. All of his movements were instinctive, were reactive. Everything he did, the offensive rebound he had in front of us, the putback that he had, and the flex and the screen, that stuff I have not seen all year. It wasn't even in Memphis. I was courtside in Memphis, the exhibition game, before we knew what he was. We just had an image in our minds of what he would be for this team, and he wasn't. And he started the other exhibition game, and he wasn't. And it's been 4 months since then. And now we finally saw something we've seen it for the last couple of games, but the other night he had a lot more asked of him. Against NC State, he hit some threes, but the game was already a blowout at that time. Against Virginia, he gave him something, but the game was not in question. The other night, the game was in question. And he stepped up. That's the first time he has stepped up to help them win a game against a moderately decent or better opponent all year.
AJ, he missed his first two shots too.
He missed his first two shots and was unfazed. And the other thing is his teammates are passing him the ball again. And I don't want to start something because I'm not going there. They weren't not passing him the ball earlier because they didn't like him or anything like that. Like, guys know if a dude's playing well. They can feel the vibe.
Yeah, that's real.
I talk about connecting and stuff like that. The connecting is when all the vibes are connecting. Right now, when this team takes the floor, all five guys on the floor connect because they have a similar vibe. Mm-hmm. They didn't always have that. And one of the reasons that Cade would play 5 minutes and not get a touch, he didn't have the same vibe to match the other guys. So there was nothing kinetically connecting those guys, nothing at all. Now in fact, they ran a play for him at the end of the first half against State. Who passed the ball? Elliott. Who passed the ball for his three against Virginia? RJ. He had a couple of kickouts the other day for threes. He hit a long jump shot. I can't remember who passed that to him. It may have been RJ as well. But he's one of the guys now on the floor. When he steps on the floor, he and the other four guys are in a very common wavelength. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen that all year. So when people talk about, they've just beat crap teams, you've got to peel the onion, man.
Yes.
And you got to get inside and look at all these little things that are lining up now that never lined up before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was scoring a bunch against LaSalle. It's meaningless in a lot of ways because nothing was built off of that. I mean, Hubert's confidence in him didn't really even grow. He was producing against LaSalle and American and crap like that. He wasn't doing it in ACC games. Now he did it the other day and against a team that a week earlier I would have said there's no way he even plays in that game, much less gives them any production. I'm not saying that's going to keep up, but hey, if you're closing out February and you've got a Jalen Withers who has suddenly become a fan favorite overnight because he's produced, and suddenly people don't wince at the idea of Cade Tyson getting on the floor, things are changing. That doesn't mean they're going to beat Duke. It doesn't mean they're going to compete against Duke. What it means is they're better than they were. Mm-hmm. So they're making progress. Is it enough to get in the NCAA tournament? Are they good enough to even win a game in the NCAA tournament? Are they good enough to even go to Dayton and beat an Indiana, which I can envision the committee just salivating over that idea of a North Carolina-Indiana-Dayton game? And there is a running joke, as I sidebar, some people in the media saying, is North Carolina so elite that they would turn down a Dayton spot? That's for humor purposes. That's not a real discussion. So I think that Jay Witt's play, him speaking out and suddenly having a little Cormac and a little Harrison out there, and it's there, and it's been needed. When Hubert says his team's noisier, well, one reason is because Jay Witt's come back out of the shell. Mm-hmm. And this is almost like bonus time for him, because I would be willing to bet you that there were moments in January and early February where he thought, this is it. My career's over. And I'm not getting on the damn floor. But he's mentally strong enough, and he's taught a lot of conversations with his dad that he's worked through it. So this is all gravy to him now. And he's going to make the most of it. And then you got a guy like Cade. People were saying Cade should just stop playing and quit and just transfer. Save his year, because Hubert's not going to play him. It's not going to work here. Suddenly, here we are in February 24th, and we talked to 5 players in the hallway outside the locker room down in Tallahassee. And who are 3 of them? Jalen Washington, people have been shoveling dirt on him for 4 months. Jalen Withers, people shoveled all the dirt on him a month ago. And Cade Tyson never even got to the cemetery. They just threw him in a river somewhere. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So all 3 of those guys we talked to the other night, I don't care who they've played. This is progress. Mm-hmm. You can downplay it till the cows come home. And it doesn't mean they're going to beat Duke or compete with Duke, but it means that they have made clear progress. They have changed in their approach. And Hubert the other night basically said without saying, I'm not going back there. We're done with that. That's in the rearview mirror. We're going to be this moving forward, and let's see how everything plays out.
Just to read off a couple stats from Cade Tyson over this 4-game streak. He has 17 combined points in his last 4 games. And that might not sound like a lot to people, but let me put some context around that. He scored just 11 combined points in his previous 11 appearances going back to the LaSalle game on December 24th, in which he dropped 23, which is his career high at North Carolina. So 4 games, 17 points. The 11 previous, he had just 11 points. So that shows where the production's gone up a little bit. And I told this to you at the UVA game this past weekend, AJ, but I was crunching some numbers there in that game. And I think this, again, it helps illustrate the struggles that Carolina has had finding a competent stretch 4 and consistent stretch 4 production. The NC State and UVA games, so those are back-to-back games, was just the second time this season in ACC play that Tyson and Withers have both hit at least 1-3 in back-to-back games. The other stretch was Louisville, Notre Dame. Carolina went 1-1 in that stretch. So let that sink in. There's only 2 times this season in ACC play where Withers and Tyson in back-to-back games have each at least hit 1-3. That shows you how much Carolina has struggled at the position. And some of that was because Hubert went to that small lineup, because Withers and Tyson weren't working out and weren't producing like they used to. So that plays a factor. But that, again, helps illustrate how not only the production wasn't there for most of the season, particularly when Carolina was really struggling, but how it's gone up a little bit. And the last thing I'll say on this 4 thing, let's look at Hubert's 5th year. All right, let's look at the sample we have. Let's look at his 4 years here. Carolina struggles in his first year, completely fine, but they make a run to the national championship game, up 15 against Kansas, could have won it. Who's the guy everybody talks about? Brady Manick.
Yeah.
What position did he play? Oh, he's a stretch 4. Okay, cool. Let's look at the second year, AJ. Pete Nance, stretch 4, comes in like plugging a square peg into a round hole. It doesn't work out. Carolina struggles that year. There is not a stretch 4 that is producing like they need to, and Carolina struggles. There's other reasons, obviously, for we're not going to go into. But if we're just focusing on the 4 there, not a good year. The 4 struggled. Let's look at last year. Who played for North Carolina last year? Got Harrison Ingram. Okay. Harrison Ingram produced, one of the best players on the team. Fantastic. He was arguably, you could make a case that he was behind RJ, was Carolina's best player last year. That was the best year Hubert's had. Makes sense. This year, Carolina's struggling, right? And now they're picking it up a little bit, albeit against less competition, but the 4s are producing more. So it's almost like we all kind of knew this, But it's almost like if you look at the sample size of this, and sorry, I said he was his fifth year, he was his fourth. If you look at the sample size of it, there is this direct correlation of Hubert's better teams having really good stretch foreplay. So it shouldn't be a surprise that when these fours start playing better, and it's almost like there's a process that we talk about a lot with the season too, where sometimes it doesn't happen automatically and there has to be growth and there has to be trying things out and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. But to me, there is a big sample size here to show that in order for Hubert Davis's system to kind of work like we've seen, there needs to be positive stretch foreplay. And the fact that we're seeing it now, I think shouldn't be a surprise that we're seeing Carolina, albeit against some weaker competition, play some of its best basketball of the season. So there's little things like that. You can also look at the history of it and see that, okay, yeah, it kind of shows that Hubert's best teams have had really good stretch foreplay. It's not a surprise there.
Jalen started the Elon game through the Michigan State game. Now they were 4-3. Excuse me. They were 4-3, but they had the lead with 3 minutes left at Kansas and lost. That was before Kansas fell apart. And they have kind of fallen apart a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
They took care, obviously, of American and Elon. They won at Hawaii. They beat Dayton, which is still a good team. But the top of the A-10 is pretty good. So they beat Dayton on a neutral floor. You know, in hindsight now, we look back to the Auburn game, and I've seen Auburn do a lot worse to a lot of teams. Mm-hmm. Good teams in their league. Carolina lost by 13, and Auburn never shot higher than 45.2% for a half, which, to be honest with you, for this Carolina team is pretty good because I think 26 halves so far, I believe, opponents have shot at least 50%. And they played, 29 games? So 26 of 58 halves. It's a pretty high percentage. Auburn didn't do it. And then they should have beaten Michigan State. If Elliott Cadeau makes a layup, they beat Michigan State. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, Hubert's thinking this isn't working because Jay Witt struggled in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. He committed some stupid fouls. He wasn't hitting. He just didn't look like he was aligned with the rest of the guys. So they come back home and play Alabama, and Drake Powell's out there starting. Well, they got blown out that night. Yeah. What have they been against competitive teams since then? Good teams. Alabama blew them out. Carolina played pretty well against Florida and were unable to finish the deal. They beat UCLA because 2 reasons. Ian Jackson was outstanding that night, and also Mick Cronin totally screwed up not using Bilodeau better, and UCLA missed a bunch of free throws. And then they go to Louisville, and Louisville closes 14-2. Duke annihilates them. Clemson annihilates them. These are games in which Jay Witt was not really a factor and was not given the opportunity to be a factor. So now they get him back in the lineup, and I know that Florida State isn't those other teams, but Carolina put 96 on the board in Tucker Center with Ian Jackson scoring 5 points. Mm-hmm. They're clearly better, more competitive, more physical, feistier, a little bit more of a screw you, jackass element on the floor when Withers is out there. So it's been rediscovered, and maybe some of the stuff that was missing from earlier is there now. We can ask him till the cows come home. Why? I think he'll just say what he's kind of already said. Hey, man, my time's running out. I got to leave it all out there. Mm-hmm. So maybe there was a different mindset in November than what you have now, and that's why he's playing better, and he's suddenly been consistent. That's the other thing. He wasn't consistent earlier. Now he's become consistent. So they have proven through 29 games that when Withers is getting the bulk of the minutes at the 4, this is a better basketball team than when he doesn't. Mm-hmm. Even if he doesn't produce a whole lot statistically, they're just still even if he misses a dunk, which he does sometimes, even if he dribbles the ball off his foot or whatever, because when he gets past 2 dribbles on a drive, all kinds of stuff can happen. It doesn't matter. They're still a better team. Mm-hmm. He needs to be on the court for a minimum 25 minutes every game moving forward for this team to have a chance to prove it truly is better than it was previously. And that measuring stick will come up here in less than 2 weeks, week and a half now.
Yeah, 100%. And last thing I'll say before we move on to the GM talk is, again, talking about how, Carolina hasn't beaten anybody in this stretch. again, which is fair in some ways. But again, like we've tried to illustrate, it's about, and what I've tried to illustrate from talking to people, especially on Twitter, is it's not that they're winning, it's how they're winning. And just to run through a couple things, they never trailed against Q State or UVA. 24-point win over State, 15-point win over UVA, 11-point win over FSU most recently. To throw in a couple more things that kind of illustrate it, it's the 4th win in a row, like I mentioned. They've scored 90-plus points for the second time in 3 games. That's a positive. You look at how they're playing on the glass. I mean, just looking at the Florida State performance alone, 35-21 on the glass, 42-24 points in the paint, 6 guys in double figures. You know, it is a more of a team effort that is contributing. The stats are kind of showing that as well. So that's what I've really tried to illustrate with people is it's fine and it's fair to say that Carolina hasn't beat the greatest of competition. We get that, but you have to dive in deeper than that and realize that the team is playing better all around. You have stretch fours and Jalen Withers and Cade Tyson playing some of the best basketball they've played all season, if not the best. And it's showing. AJ, let me ask you this. Do you think how this team's playing right now beats Boston College in overtime or barely, is a missed layup away from winning at Notre Dame? I don't. I think they're in a lot more control in those games like they've shown over these last 4. Control's been a big talking point, and I think they win them a lot more convincingly. So you have to, dive into it deeper than just looking at, okay, who's the opponent and did they win or they lose?
Plus 10 at Notre Dame, plus 10 State. No, Jalen Blakes is never in position to hit a big shot for Stanford. Mm-hmm. They close out BC in regulation. Mm-hmm. Maybe they win at Pitt. Pitt stinks now. They lost to Georgia Tech last night.
Garbage. Yeah, they're garbage.
Yeah, Capel's suddenly going to be in trouble. I still think he's the right guy for that job, but he's got to prove it too.
Yeah, you're not showing it right now. No.
Not at all. They would have beaten them at home, and that would be a difference. I mean,
we're having a different conversation right now.
If you had the Stanford games, their quad 3 loss. If you had that game back, what are they? They're 19-10. They're 12-5. Mm-hmm. All right. If you had that game back, what that does is that means that their only losses are quad 1 losses. And there were some close ones in there. And the committee's going to look at who they play. When they study November and December, which has way too much bearing on the season because Carolina's at a point now where they go win big. They go win by 11 points at Florida State, and they don't move up in the net. That's a problem. The net is baked in by Christmas. However, you go back and look at who they were playing before Christmas. Look at the last week that the NCAA put out their new seedings every week for the top 16. All 4 1 seeds Carolina's played. Mm-hmm. And, okay, 3 of them beat them up pretty good, but you could argue they should have beaten Florida, or they were in position to beat Florida. And the reason they lost to Florida scored 8 second chance points in the final 3 minutes. Who was not on the floor during those 3 minutes? Jalen Withers.
Yep.
You had Drake Powell at the 4. If you change that, maybe some of those balls are challenged more. Maybe one is tipped and it's a loose ball and a Tar Heel picks it up and they go the other way and they score. Mm-hmm. Or certainly don't give up the second chance points there. So the committee would look at that. And this team's 19-10, 12-5 right now. I think they're in a different situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Add in that Michigan State one, which Withers did play a lot, but man, they would love to have that back. But they can't have any of that back. They are who they are right now, and they must continue to march forward, getting better. And I think what we've seen the last 4 games, if that's the approach the rest of the way, this team is better situated to at least hang with Duke than it was a few weeks ago, because that club stood 0 chance of winning that game. They lost that game before they ever even arrived in Durham. And that could be the case here in a week and a half. And the reason it's okay to talk about that game now is because A, it's almost here. B, it is the measuring stick.
Yeah.
Because they could throttle Miami, which they should. They could go run out Virginia Tech on the road next Tuesday, which they should. And a 6-game win streak with lopsided wins going into Duke won't mean a damn thing if they don't back it up with their performance against Duke.
Yeah.
People will just look back and say, see, AJ and Jacob, we told you, it's just because they're playing crappy teams. I get it.
You might be right.
I completely get it. But I do think the composition and approach we've seen is their best one that this club should play. So they're going to have as good a chance as as possible, given who they are, once they hit the Duke game and then go to Charlotte. And Charlotte, if they win that Wednesday, which they'll probably play, they're going to probably have to play Louisville or Clemson on Thursday. That's not good. Neither one good matchups.
No, not at all.
Clemson's a terrible matchup. Clemson and Duke are just awful matchups for this team. Louisville might be a little bit more manageable.
Yeah,
but they got to get to that point first.
Yeah, and Duke, obviously, big news in Durham, too, because Tyrese Proctor's status kind of injured his knee Tuesday against Miami. That is kind of up in the air right now.
Yeah.
I don't wish injury on anybody. I know you shouldn't wish injury, but that is something that could dramatically change Duke's
and Malik Brown's out, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
He came back for the first Carolina Duke game, and you could just see how he makes them different.
Yeah.
He gives them a great screener. He gives them a lot of stuff that, by the way, Carolina still is not a very good screening team, but they've been a little bit better lately. A little bit better. Jalen Washington laid an actual screen the other night, a physical screen. I don't mean to make.
No, I know what you're saying. It's
an area he struggled. This is not news to anybody. It sure as hell isn't news to him.
Mm-hmm.
He struggled in that area, but he laid out a screen the other night. Now, if this team can add that, and there was a role, Lubin's screens have been better, and he's been scoring off some of them lately. Mm-hmm. And you know why? Because there isn't that second defender out there. You know why? Because you got a stretch 6'9" guy who could shoot from the corner or the wing, and they got to stay out there a little bit more. So those roles are working better. Lubin is getting less contested stuff at the rim now as a result of Jay-Witt being out there than he was before.
Yeah. And that guy that's standing in the corner that you mentioned, Ale, and Jalen Withers, he's also, Carolina, like you said, Carolina's best 3-point shooter. You can't just leave him out there. Right? Literally, factually, their best 3-point shooter. So that, again, stretches the court and it plays.
And you got to put a body on him because he's probably – Lubin has become their best putback guy. Mm-hmm. But Withers is a good putback guy too, so you have to lay a body on him.
Exactly.
How many putbacks did Drake Powell get as a 4? So you got to put a body on him. You have to put a body on him.
That's huge. It's huge.
So and that's why this team has 62 second chance points in its last 3 games, because they're better attacking the offensive glass. Teams must put bodies on everybody.
Yeah.
And Drake Powell, as an offensive rebounder at the 3 spot, that's a sight to behold. If he's back next year, people are going to think of him as one of the better offensive rebounders from the wing this program's ever had. He's got that kind of stuff. And Hubert's actually mentioned that before.
Now, Powell's really good. He contributes in different ways. I call him kind of a Swiss Army knife because he can just contribute in so many different ways. And you need guys like that on your rosters. And some of the most successful teams usually do have a guy like that who can kind of do a little bit of everything for you and also excel in some areas too. So yeah, I hope he does stay at Carolina for a few years because I think it is going to be fun to watch his kind of career trajectory, because I could see him taking just a massive step forward next year too, because of what he's had to go through this year. Because again, playing out of position isn't great for him in his first year, and it hasn't been great for the team. But overall, as time goes on, he'll benefit from playing more at the 4 this year than if he just played at the 3 the whole time, because he, experienced new things, was put in, tricky situations that he wasn't used to, out of his comfort zone. And again, all that leads to more development in the future. So
One quick comment on that before we transition, because people want to hear the GM.
We're going to talk about that here in a second.
I agree with you about Drake. If anything, it showed him just how much work he used to put in the weight room in the off season, because he just wasn't ready for that. And the same wiry, bouncy, springy, nose for a ball guy that he is at the wing now, imagine 8 to 10 more pounds in strength throughout. That he's going to be, or even a little bit more, he'll be even better. Yeah. So he's a really smart guy. Mm-hmm. When you talk to him after games, it's obvious he's very thoughtful. He's got a handle on who he is. So he will do everything he needs to do to better himself in the off season. And I guarantee you, eating that extra cinnamon roll, which a lot of these guys do, by the way, they eat a lot of stuff like that because they're trying to build. Eating what he's supposed to eat, the extra stuff, and getting in the weight work will not be an issue for him. He'll come back wherever he is next year, but assuming it's Chapel Hill, he'll come back noticeably thicker.
Yeah, 100%. And we see it all the time with guys. You can go look at so many players at Carolina throughout the history. Look at their freshman year pictures.
Honey buns. I was thinking honey buns.
Honey bun. I'd rather have a cinnamon roll than a honey bun, but that's.
Well, you know, one of the things I used to marvel at, and I'm going off the reservation here for a second. I'm going somewhere a lot of people don't want to hear, but I'm going to do it for a reason. When Duke lets the media in at home in the locker room, and I covered Duke for years as well. And when Brian Zubek was there, Duke had on the floor boxes of pastries in the back of the locker room. And I remember one time I'm talking to whoever, and like maybe Shire, because I love talking to Shire back in the day. And like Zubek just has handfuls of pastries walking out. He squeezed them together and took a giant bite out of it, right? The players, one of the Duke players back then, eating that stuff after games, they had honey buns, massive honey buns. And it's like, man, I wouldn't mind grabbing. I mean, I'm not a big honey bun guy, but it looks so good. I wanted it sometime.
Yeah, probably did. Yeah.
But my point is that they want these guys eating stuff like that, even still, because they want those carbs to build into something. Mm-hmm. It's a replenishment for after games then, and also to build in. So I imagine that if honey buns are on the menu for Drake Powell this offseason, he's going to eat a lot of them.
Yeah, be having plenty of them for sure. I'll have to ask him about him maybe media day next year, what that looks like. If he's been eating a lot of what his diet regimens look like in the offseason, that'll be a question I'm sure we'll ask if he comes back looking significantly stronger.
I hope he does too.
Well.
Because I want to see him continue to develop.
Yeah, he's a good player, really is. Let's talk about the general manager news that finally came out. Jim Tanner hired as the executive director and GM at North Carolina. Just to give some background on Tanner, he's a Carolina graduate back in 1990 and a High Point native as well. And just to give some of his professional background, he's the president and founder of Tandem Sports and Entertainment, a sports agency that represents current NBA players and is also repped a few former Tar Heels, Tyler Hansbrough, Marvin Williams, Raymond Felton, Justin Jackson, to name a few. And this line right, or this segment right here is directly from Carolina's release on it. In this role, Tanner will, among other things, help manage the construction of the roster, negotiate contracts, identify and hire new scouting and analytics staff, and spearhead player development programs. All that to me sounds like exactly what a GM would and should be doing. But AJ,
and exactly what we said.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that we had talked about this back in before Belichick got hired. I believe we had talked about it on podcasts of
late November.
Football is moving in this direction. They're going to hire a GM. That's going to happen. Basketball is going to do the same thing. And then obviously Carolina talked about it in Belichick's. It was mentioned in Belichick's press conference announcement when they had everybody in the Keenan Football Center in the Blue Zone. They talked about it a little bit there. So again, that's a reason why you should watch our stuff and why you should be on our message boards, $833 a month, because you get insight like this. This is something AJ's been talking about and we've been talking about since November. It has finally happened. And I think on the surface, time will tell, but I think on the surface, the hire and the background that Tanner brings and also having that Carolina connection, I think it makes a ton of sense why you bring in a guy like him. So AJ, what is your thoughts on Jim Tanner's hiring and Carolina finally solidifying and finalizing that GM and executive director position? I should throw that in as well.
Well, first and foremost, it's good that everything I was told by multiple extremely well-placed sources back in November and then in throughout December that I reported here many times is spot on 100%. They're doing it. They did it for football. Michael Lombardi has a staff of 30 working under him. You could basically call it the player acquisition department if you want, because that's what it is. Basketball isn't going to have 30. They don't need 30, but there might be 4 or 5 with significant roles and significant people, and they're going to have someone who does international stuff. This program was the last international guy this program had. You look around the country, there's some international players on a lot of really good teams. And this program needs to be better there. But I'll tell you, I can list a dozen reasons why this is going to work and immediately make Carolina better. A, because it catches Carolina up with the times, number one. B, whether Hubert wanted it or not, this was coming. Okay? whether he wanted it or not. And I'm not suggesting that he didn't and he doesn't embrace it. I'm not saying that. This was going to happen no matter what. With the contract and everything, didn't matter. This is going to happen. Carolina, the same thing with football. And I wrote before Belichick even got hired, when I wrote a column in football about the next coach, no matter who they hire, Carolina's better situated for the next coach because the proof is already there that the buy-in to doing whatever it takes is there. It's in place. In basketball, that question is gone. You can't go there. Even though hundreds and hundreds of times we've refuted the very simple low-hanging fruit narrative about last spring about how things played out. Now that's not an issue because remember what when I'm in person with people, I'll say, Hubert just didn't want to deal with someone who talked to him like this first instead of like this first. This is gimme. This is handshake. It's just, if you know Hubert, the kind of guy he is.
Yeah.
Now it's not up to Hubert. It's up to Hubert who they bring in because it's his program. It's his team. It's his roster he has to coach. So Jim Tanner will work with him on that. But by the time Hubert talks to a kid, it's all going to be this. Because Jim Tanner's going to handle this. So if it gets to that point, this is basically taken care of. So Hubert doesn't have to gauge a kid on that. He could solely gauge a kid on how does he help me win basketball games? How does he contribute to the culture I want in this program? He doesn't have to be jaded by, man, that kid had his hand out first for money. Danny Wolf had his hand out for money. I'm using him as an example. So I can't envision him as a player helping us because I don't like that intro. Or that intro isn't what I'm comfortable with. That's no longer an issue now. So this is massive moving forward. Plus the money's there. The other thing I said back in December repeatedly is that every dime that's needed for football is there. Every dime that's needed for basketball is there. They are doing exactly what I was told they were going to do before they did any of it. And I get tremendous pleasure and joy out of that because I like knowing that the sources I'm talking to, I can trust. And they were spot on. I mean, they have not wavered in any of the things that I've been told about what was going to come down the pike. And Carolina fans should be so excited. The excitement you have over not just Belichick, but most people I've talked to, they reference the complete buy-in to football that excites them more because that's going to last longer than Belichick will. Now they can have the same level of excitement about basketball because North Carolina isn't just going to pitch North Carolina because of those words and because of the jerseys hanging up there, which was an incredible tool. It could still be an incredible tool.
Yeah, it helps.
Imagine you're going to be compensated like you should and wear this and play with that stuff up there in this building, which should not be torn down, which should just be renovated. You've got a building with mystique. Don't walk away. Don't be stupid and walk away so quickly. Take a lot of that money that you would invest in a new building and reinvest it into these programs. So I think it's a great move. I think Jim Tanner is an incredible hire. He knows how to do this. He's done it. He's had 40 first round NBA picks or something like that.
Yeah, something crazy like
crazy
that.
Number like
he's
that.
managed a ton of big names.
He knows what he's doing. The offices are up in Arlington, so it's right outside DC. He knows how to do. When you can succeed in a place like DC or New York, when handshaking is one of the most important things you can do, that means you're damn good at what you do and you know how to play the game.
Oh, yeah.
So they have hired a guy that knows how to play the game. They've hired a guy that knows numbers. They've hired a guy that knows talent. They've hired a guy that knows the handshake. And if you got to go a little extra with the handshake and look someone in the eye to win them over, he knows to do that. He's that guy. And he's someone who, because this is North Carolina basketball we're talking about, is an alum. His kids
had to be. It had to be.
And he's going to bring in a group that gets it too. We talked about Buzz Peterson a couple of weeks ago. Well, David Sisk has said all along that if it's not Buzz as the number one guy, it's Buzz maybe the number two guy. And that's what we're hearing right now, that Buzz will be involved. And that's great, because what is the connection there? Tell us. You know what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who's connected to Buzz Peterson?
Yeah.
Who's got all this? The players go crazy when they open up a new box of shoes and it's his shoes.
Mm-hmm.
He's Buzz's dude.
Just got to get him to believe in NIL.
If anybody can get him to believe in NIL, it's Buzz Peterson.
I would hope so. I would think so, yeah.
And I would imagine Roy's got some. See, Roy wasn't an NIL guy. Roy said here recently that he couldn't run the program now the way he did. And that goes back to Hubert's comments about the Carolina basketball way doesn't work anymore. That's what he was talking about. The Carolina basketball way goes well beyond pointing to the passer and running to the bench during a timeout. It goes way beyond huddling at the free throw line. It goes way beyond that. There's a certain cultural buy-in that is the Carolina way, and you can't really lean on that anymore because this new caveat has been thrust into the mix called cash. So that has to be the part that lures the kids in as much as anything else, which is why the old Carolina way doesn't work. You could still have that, and kids can come to love it over time. Brady Manick did. I mean, if you talk to Brady right now, and I haven't talked to Brady in a while, but I imagine he would tell you that there's something about having success under the umbrella of Carolina basketball that is just uniquely different and binds you for life. Mm-hmm. He put a good teams in Oklahoma. He got to Oklahoma not long after they were in the Final Four. Remember, they were there in 2016 when Carolina was there. Yeah. Oklahoma's been in like 6 Final Fours. They've had good teams. Should have won a national title in '88, but Danny Manning and the Miracles got him. Mm-hmm. So he played where basketball has a pretty good history, but he spent 1 year there, and it's just different. Mm-hmm. So you can get the money and also have the Brady Manick experience and be a part of it for life. The Harrison Ingram, when he had his weekend off in the NBA, didn't go to Palo Alto. He came to Chapel Hill. It's different. So if you combine the money with the it's different, then you can have a modern day version of the Carolina way. And it's brought to you by Jim Tanner, Buzz Peterson, and perhaps MJ with cash. Cash is not going to be an issue. It wasn't really an issue last spring. It was more approach and certain barriers that had to be knocked down. Those barriers don't exist now. They're gone. Completely gone, guys. This spring, Carolina is going to do what it needs to do in the portal. And it needs to do some work.
Yeah, and they'll be in a lot better position to do so because you have a guy like Jim Tanner who is built for that role and has a history in that role and has success in that role, and not necessarily being a GM, but, you know, owning and operating a sports agency that's represented former North Carolina players, that's represented other guys, Ray Allen, Tim Duncan, Grant Hill, just to name a few. I mean, when it's almost like when you have a guy that's there to do a job and that's what he specified, that's what he excels in, you're probably going to have more success building a roster and managing the program because, AJ, things have changed. There's a reason that Brad Brownell, after this season, is going to be the longest tenured coach in the ACC. There's a reason a lot of these old guys are leaving. There's a reason, you know, years ago that Roy stepped away because the things in college basketball and college sports are changing. Carolina's adapting with the times. And, you know, I agree. I think it's a really good hire. And I think it's one, when you look at the history of it and you look at Tanner's resume, makes a ton of sense. Time will tell how successful he'll be in that role and how he works with Hubert and how this program continues to develop and step into this new age of college athletics. But on paper, really good hire. And I think it makes a ton of sense.
Let me add one more thing to that before we go on to the contract. Ray Allen, Tim Duncan, and Grant Hill. Okay, well, I actually got in his business when Tim Duncan was still playing. I specifically, vividly remember interviewing him in the Wake locker room at Maryland, at Cole Fieldhouse, and how thrilling that was for me. Very smart, thoughtful guy. Grant Hill, very smart, thoughtful guy. I had some words with him a couple years ago in the Final Four about South Lakes High School. Same kind of words I've had with Hubert about Lake Braddock because we're all from Northern Virginia, right? And I saw Grant play in high school. Very thoughtful, very smart guy. Could have hired any agent he wanted to. Ray Allen could have hired any agent he wanted to. If those three guys, think about it. These are not idiots we're talking about. These are not the kind of NBA players that ran out of money 3 years after they finished playing. If those three guys saw Jim Tanner as the dude for them, that sells it for me.
Dominique Wilkins in theirs too. I mean,
Dominique Wilkins, another one.
Not a bad player, right?
No, well, not a bad player, but also a guy who gets it. A guy who, I mean, but Grant and Duncan, I don't know Allen. I've never met Ray Allen. I don't know anything about.
Comes off as that. He comes off,
but he comes off as sort of the same ilk. So Carolina is getting not just a guy who could get people, but the right kind of guy. So if you want to have a new form Carolina way, Tanner strikes me as the kind of guy who can help create that for you and still be buttoned up and polished, which is what they love in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, no, I think it again, on paper, I think it's a fantastic hire. And again, time will tell what it ends up being and what kind of job he ends up doing, how successful he is in North Carolina. But I think Carolina, safely say now, Carolina, let's go back 12 months. Carolina's in a better position now in the new landscape of college athletics than it was 12 months ago, than it was a month ago.
1,000%.
Yeah,
1,000%.
And that's how you have to look at it. And again, we'll see how it goes, and we'll see how it starts in particular this offseason. But AJ, last thing, Hubert Davis's contract extension. I think we poured it on things started coming out on Tuesday, I believe. I think that's when we put.
I was flying back from Tallahassee.
Yeah, a lot of stuff broke after the FSU game for some reason.
Well, yeah, because I got confirmation on Tanner.
Yeah,
I was still in the press room at Tucker Center.
Yeah,
I was the last one there. In fact, some custodian, that's true story. Some custodian guy works or runs the building or something, steps in the press room and says, "You gonna turn out the lights when you're done?" I swear, not 5 minutes later, I found out about Tanner. And fortunately, I was able to get some kind of enough confirmation pretty quickly at that time of night. And yes, I did turn the lights out.
Yeah, good for you, man. I'm glad. I was going to ask if you were actually remembered to do that.
But I was flying. The Hubert stuff's different because we knew that he agreed last summer. We had something on our site.
Yes.
I was Kevin Roy, you were in the thread. We're kind of going back. I think I landed in Charlotte, connecting in Charlotte, and I'm like, well, we had something. I didn't remember the specifics. We didn't have anything in December. We didn't know he signed it. In December. I didn't find that out until yesterday, but we had something about an agreement last summer. But I'm like, why is this news? What is there newsy about this? I didn't even realize he didn't sign it. You know what I mean? I assumed it. I mean, it never crossed my radar until yesterday. So after I got home and had to take care of some husband duties and fatherly duties and things like that, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to dive into this and see what I can find out. And
you found it out.
it's what it was. Brian Murphy did a really good job. WRAL, he's very good investigative reporter. I mean, he's very good at finding these things out. And apparently, we're looking into something else about coaches' salaries, and they came across this. And wait a second, this was December. Okay. So that was unearthed. You go ahead and do what you got to do.
Yeah. Let me read some of the stuff about his contract, some specifics for it. Again, agreement between Davis and UNC was reached in July, is what AJ's talking about, back in the summer. It wasn't signed until December, however, which again, according to a report from Dariel, who kind of first pulled it up, because it was able to get a copy of Hubert's contract. The extension.
That's rock solid. Brian's, all of his reporting is rock solid, 100%.
That's rock solid. The extension is for 6 years, beginning with the current one, runs through 2030. And the total amount is $19.2 million, $7.5 million total base salary, $11.7 million in supplemental income. Works out to be an average of about $3.2 million a season. The yearly base salary is $1.25 million plus $1.7 in supplemental salary, and that total will increase annually by $100,000. So, again, not really a surprise based on what we heard. It's just kind of now come out as being official. A little interesting maybe that it wasn't signed until December. But I want to ask you this, AJ. Hubert Davis's job has been something that's been talked about a lot this year, rightly so, because of how Carolina's struggled. Obviously, some of that's gone away, I think, recently because, again, albeit against bad teams. Let me throw that out there before people get on me. Carolina is winning now, and like I always say, winning solves everything. But when I look at this, let me take you to what my mind went to when I heard this news, because again, this kind of broke very shortly, back to back kind of thing. Jim Tanner hired as a GM. Okay. Hubert Davis gets a contract extension. Talked about in July, wasn't agreed to sign until December. Okay. That to me, my first thought was, well, I guess Hubert's not going anywhere. Do you look at it that way, or do you think, no, this stuff really has no bearing on it because, again, coaching things are so fluid and things can change so differently depending on how are you winning or you're losing games. But that's where my mind immediately went to, and I would imagine a lot of Carolina fans' minds probably went immediately to that too.
Well, Texas A&M football has shown us that if you really want to get rid of a coach, no matter what the buyout is, you'll go ahead and get rid of that coach.
I guess it would cost more money to do it now. I would.
Yeah, but Hubert's buyout's not that big, and I don't think the contract has any bearing on his job security whatsoever.
Okay.
And I say that not implying he has job security questions.
Yeah.
I also say that not implying he doesn't have job security questions. If the season plays out as most people expect, he'll go into next year on a warm seat, and rightfully so. This is North Carolina here. This isn't Mississippi State. Mm-hmm. It's not what Indiana's become. I saw the other day, as I sidebar again for the 87th time today, where Indiana beating Purdue the other day. Someone put out on Twitter, someone pretty reputable national media said, "Hey, Indiana's probably going to make a tournament. That's 3 out of 4 years in the tournament under Mike Woodson." As if that's some kind of, hey, maybe they should have waited.
Yeah, that's not really a barometer.
It's Indiana basketball, but that's what Indiana's become. 3 out of 4 just making the tournament. That's not North Carolina, and it would take 2 decades like it has for Indiana to get to this point. Mm-hmm. So he will enter the season next year on a warm seat, almost regardless of what happens from here on out. However, the thing that told me that anyone who thinks that, boy, if they just lose out and Duke crushes them, they'll get rid of Hubert and we can go get Nate Oates. You got to pump the brakes on that because Jim Tanner was hired. Yeah. What did we say last week? I think it was last week on the basketball show. The longer it takes for a GM to be hired, it's probably fair to say the less secure you can see Hubert's job. Mm-hmm. Because if Jim Tanner gets hired and brings in a staff, let's say for the sake of discussion, they go get a Nate Oates or a Chris Beard, or they bring a Billy Donovan in, which is a name that I've heard, if it were ever to come to. Well, are they going to want to work with him? Maybe Donovan might know him because of the NBA. Maybe he would stay because he's very well respected, but most coaches are going to want to bring their own GM in. Belichick didn't let Carolina hire the GM for football. He hired the GM for football. So him being on board and how he's going to build that front office, if you will, is what I need to know, that barring something incredibly egregious, I don't see a change being made. And I think they've gone past the point of egregious, because I thought the one thing that would, you and I talked about this after Clemson, I thought the one thing that could cook Hubert's goose would be the team quitting on him.
Mm-hmm. That hasn't happened, no.
And that was probably the only thing, and they haven't quit on him. Mm-hmm. I could see a scenario where this group maybe don't lose it home to Miami, but somehow stumbles at Castle.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Or gets annihilated by Duke again, but they haven't quit on him. So Tanner being hired means there'll be year 5 of Hubert in my book.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think it's fair
too. The contract extension, it doesn't mean he's going to be head coach till 2030, and the buyout's not much. And I personally believe that now, with Hubert having all the resources of a GM, all the advantages of a GM, and having an opportunity to go out and really replenish in the spring, which I think this program is going to do, because you could point to some positions that they need to go to the portal and get guys. Mm-hmm. Next year, 0 excuses. Year 5, 0 excuses. You can't say, well, they didn't give them the money to get somebody in the portal, even though they had the money last year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, no excuses. So there'll be a year 5. I don't know if there'll be a year 6. We'll have to wait 12 months before we have that conversation, but there will be a year 5.
Yeah. And if you're giving a guy a contract extension, you're obviously backing him. I mean, it's a 6-year deal. It's not talking about a 1-year additional.
It's still recruiting. I know that Portland.
Yeah, that's a big contract extension right there. 6 years?
But it's not a massive buyout. Contract extensions are often shows of good faith.
Yeah, it shows me that hey, we believe in
so
this
you
guy.
can tell recruits this guy's going to be here. He's got this. I remember when Paul Hewitt got to the national title game at Georgia Tech, they gave him an automatic rollover, and that was the worst thing that ever happened to him because Georgia Tech didn't want to buy that out, so they were stuck with him for a while. But you don't want a coach walking into a living room and in any sport and having a parent say, well, your contract runs out next year. Are you even going to be there?
That's a good point.
If the conversation goes there, you're not getting that kid.
No.
So you have to have these extensions. You have to have it worked out the way it does. The buyout's not much. So, and you know what? If the whole GM thing works, and Hubert has shown us in recent weeks, Jacob, that he can acknowledge what he was apparently married to for a while didn't work. When he go back to the beginning of the show, when Cade Tyson went in, when Lubin and Jay Wash picked up their fourth fouls, that was Hubert saying, that other way is gone. Whether it was a conversation with someone that helped him get to that point or he realized on his own, that's gone. So fourth-year head coaches who spent 9 years as an assistant, 7 years on ESPN, 12 years in the NBA, 4 years playing for Dean, 4 years at Lake Braddock High School, and being Walter Davis's nephew, can still learn in their mid-50s as well. So how much does he continue to learn moving forward? We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see, man. But that's a good place to wrap this one up. One of our longer editions, hour and 10 minutes or so.
I just saw that. How much of that was me babbling?
I'll have to go back and look. I'll have to look at the analytics and stuff. Pull out my analytical hat and see what I can find.
I went sidebar. I went sidebar a lot on this one, but
we went an hour and 7 last week. So I mean, may just be on brand.
The reason I sidebar is to try to build more of the picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Try to hoist up the point I'm trying to make a little bit.
Yeah, in the basketball show, we hit on a lot of topics. It's not a 3 things where it's 20, 25 minutes. It is meant to be a little bit more of a long form podcast. And again, give you guys a little bit different variety instead of just doing the same type of content all the time. And the drops, I mean, they're super quick too. So yeah, it fits with what we're trying to do here.
So you want to drop today, then we'll run Friday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, keep it locked to TarIllustrated.com and our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell too, because every single time we upload drops, podcast, interviews, press conferences, all that jazz. That's why you go ahead and hit that. And it helps us out as well. Links in the description below. Facebook, Twitter, go over there and follow those pages. We much appreciate it. And obviously, like I've said for the millionth time, subscribe. I keep saying it because I know there's people on here that watch a lot of our stuff, but for whatever reason won't take 4 seconds to hit the subscribe button. So just do it. It helps us out and it helps us grow, which is what we're trying to do over here. But I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the UNC Basketball Show. If you made it this far, we much appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you next time. Thanks.